have to ask you, Nicola, have you found the plane? We'll get on record then. You haven't found the plane. Okay, very good. Right, you're clear away now. You can go. You can go now.
See you guys. See you next week.
Enjoy the rest of your holiday, mate.
Have a nice chat. Bye-bye.
Cheers, mate. Take care. Oh, there we are then. What time is it? Oh, we're only about a minute early anyway, so that'll do. That'll do. Faulty from you. So what else have you broken that's faulty from you in that recent Blockbuster video of yours?
I've got so much broken stuff, so much stuff that just doesn't work out of the box. It's not good. And interesting, the feedback is that everyone else seems to have noticed the same thing. Quality control's slipping, it's getting worse. And so, yeah, is it the economic pressure? Is it that they're feeling the crunch with the tariffs and the way currencies are going? What is causing China to basically drop the ball they were never holding in respect to quality control?
the non-quality control ball. Yeah, I don't know. One thing I will say, and I don't know if Ian's got any insider trader dealing, but I've noticed that DJI products are disappearing kind of off the shelf. Here comes James. Hello, James. How are you?
Hi, I'm sorry, I look a little bit rough today. It's been a long
situation
one.
Normal.
Nothing unusual there then.
So where's the change? Where's the change?
I haven't looked in the mirror since this morning, and I look like I've just done a half marathon.
Quick, rush off and put some eyeliner on. It'll make all the difference.
To be fair, you'll always look better than the rest of us. So it's.
Oh, you creep! How very dare you?
That's the nicest thing I've said to today.
Yes, it's aged beards at the top here. What I was just about to say, how's it, James? What I was just about to say, have people noticed that DJI products are disappearing off the shelf, or disappearing? Can't buy them from big box retailers all around the world, UK, America, and Australia, and I wonder if they're not just going to sell direct now.
I've not heard anything official. I think this is all related to the new regulations around the corner. My understanding has always been in some of this manufacturing is it's all done in batches. It's not continuous. It's product batch. So they'll knock out 5,000 of one or 500,000 of one. And I think there's probably a reluctance to manufacture when we've got so much around the corner. Everything's up for change at the moment. Let's look at all of the regulation changes. EU, you've now got this ID thing coming out of the US as well with the FAA. I've not heard, the Spark is basically gone, I think, as I understand it. Yeah, but it's been that way for 6 months. It's nothing new. It's just stock has ran out. The P4, exactly the same. The Mavic, the original Mavic, that was never going to last forever. It was always going to end. I think what's unusual is we've had such a long period of no product release. We're at the end of a period where products running out. There's been a few websites saying things like, is DJI getting out the drone business? Nah, not for 1 minute.
Yeah, I saw that. That was nonsense, I thought, but there we are.
I think there's a combination here of probably some lowering of the supply chain because of the US tariffs, because of the reluctance to over manufacture just in case it has a dramatic effect. I think there's possibly a bit of EU effect on that as well with regards to manufacturing, the drone ID, the requirements into next year. I think it's probably the perfect storm. I think they've probably sat back and gone, we can afford to wait and see and confirm, because what would be more devastating is releasing a large amount of product now that in 6 months might not be able to sell. Then again, they've never had trouble selling product before. So, really, who does know about the changes? Let's be honest, we do. We're all involved. We all sit here and watch this stuff. For the mass market, are they really concerned that people aren't going to buy?
No, I've seen yet more conspiracy sort of theories based around all of that this week. Even more people amazed that registration's coming. Amazed, I tell you, amazed. When did that happen?
Yeah, I think if you look at it overall, everything has slowed. Not just DJI, everyone has slowed. Every firmware release is longer than it's ever been. The Mavic series, the Mavic 2, has been ridiculously stable out the box. You know, for years, people used to say DJI release and then there's 10 firmware updates. Mavic 2, Mavic 2 Pro, and Zoom just work. They just, you know, it's a great little product that does what it needs to do. The enterprise side is ticking over. They're selling a lot of handheld gear. You know, you've got the Osmo, you've got the Ronin SC, which is the latest one. I think they're probably sitting back and taking stock. You know, I think that's probably. I honestly have no actual idea. I honestly don't.
It's interesting you say that you know, they just work out the box. You know, is that a sign that they're getting better? Or is that a sign that actually the flight controllers and all the algorithms on board aren't really changing very much anymore? You know, most of the stuff really is sort of higher level, sort of either whether that's software, you know, software for processing or for flight, you know, for planning waypoints. You know, I don't know if you've seen the recent releases they've done at Intergeo. There's a bunch of stuff in there, but it's not really, they're not really features on board the aircraft. They're all kind of more higher level navigation stuff and processing. You know, that's where sort of I think they're focusing their efforts now.
I think everyone, you know, if you look at everyone, not one of these products is bad now. If you look at the Anafi, the Evo, all of the Mavic, they don't just get up and fly away. You know, people say, "Oh, fly away." It doesn't just happen anymore. The reality is, yes, failure is always going to be part of flight, but 99% of the time, all of these products just work now. I think we've got to the stage where we can mass manufacture a consumer product that just generally works without too many problems, and all the manufacturers are there. You know, you can buy any of them and be happy. And
well, you say that, I don't know if you've seen the splash drone.
Well, that's a different thing, but yeah, well, I think
there's been reports of them flying at quite high altitudes around planes recently, I think, or helicopters.
Yeah, and there was talk of whether the Unique H 520 could have been it as well, because that thing's bright orange.
Which was this? I've missed this one.
Oh, there's, you know, that helicopter, the air ambulance, which was recording a video or something about drone safety. On its way back from recording the video, it then missed a drone by about 3 meters, according to reports.
Big orange thing, yeah.
I thought that video was pretty good, actually. I thought that was very fair and balanced. And what a pity that they would select that very helicopter to go and get. What a shame.
Maybe it was just a disgruntled drone pilot. It was like, you know, leave us alone. You know, if you want a real air prox, then we'll give you one. But I don't know. It does sound quite credible, actually. Out of a lot of the reports that I've seen, you know, I saw people sort of attacking it, saying it was rubbish, and I'm kind of inclined to say, well, actually, out of all of the reports, you know, out of a lot of the reports I've seen, it's probably one of the more credible reports. You know, when you start looking at the ones at 32,000 feet, where, you know, basically a drone can't maintain hover because the air is too thin to be able to do so, you kind of, you know, they're the ones we should be concentrating on, not the ones at, you know, 1,500 feet where it's had a really good, you know, report from the pilot, who's not only named the color of the drone, the number of rotors it's got, he's even identified marks on it. You know, you kind of have to sort of start getting to that point and saying, well, okay, this one sounds credible. I think if we rubbish all of them, we end up doing ourselves more harm than good.
Yeah, well, that's a perfect way to lead into what's happening on the 19th, James?
I don't know. What is happening on the 19th?
I believe you'll be going to the AirProx stakeholder engagement meeting.
You just reminded me. I literally would have forgotten if you hadn't said anything. Yeah, so RPAS, we've been organising a meeting we've got CAA coming, we've got AirProx board, we've got an airline pilot, we have AirProx reality check, we got DJI, and we have Altitude Angel. So we've got six speakers, which is going to be quite interesting. And we're going to basically be talking about how pilots can report AirProxes better. So what kind of information they're feeding into the system, how they are then assessed. and categorized. So talking about things like, you know, probabilistic classification, because at the moment it's either a drone or it's not a drone. You know, we can either stick with that system or we can move across to okay, well, is there a, you know, if it's at 15,000 feet, then we can say maybe it's a 10% chance of being a drone or whatever. And then finally, how that's then communicated. Because the accuracy of the wording in that then gets picked up by the media, and that ends up with the public thinking that drones are out to kill them and, you know, gonna ruin their holiday. So yeah, we're basically trying to bring everyone together, you know, into the boxing ring, so to speak, and look to see if we can, you know, not only improve safety, improve the accuracy of these reports, but also improve a bit of public perception around them. So, but it's at the Royal Aeronautical Society this Thursday. I'll get Gary to put a link in the description if you want to join us. Yeah, we hope to see a few of you there. But we think it's a really important event, and obviously the fact that the likes of CAA and Steve Forward from the Airprox board are on board with this, you know, it's a really, really good opportunity for us to actually make a difference here.
No, I think it's a wonderful initiative. Well done. I've put a link in the live chat, and I'll put it in the comments when we finished, or the bit below.
I don't think there's anything bad can come from something like this. At the end of the day, more dialogue within the industry is exactly what we need around this subject specifically. James, I didn't hear at the start. Did you say Balpa are there or not?
No, we did invite Balpa, but they've got some, I think they've got some, I can't remember if it was strikes or
striking to do. Yeah.
Yeah.
Big thing.
They're a little bit busy with a small thing. Yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, unfortunately they said they couldn't make it, but it would have been good to have had them there. So instead we've just got an airline pilot to talk through the process. So at least we get to hear it, you know, from the airline pilot's point of view, because at the end of the day, you know, we don't think that airline pilots are, you know, I think the vast majority of them are out there, and you know, when they've had a long day of flying, the last thing they want to be doing is filling in forms when they come down to land. So I don't think there's any, I don't think they would maliciously, or most, I think there would be very, very few who would maliciously, you know, set out to try and fill out these reports in a malicious way. But there may be other factors, you know, psychology and things like this start playing tricks on your brain, and if it's being reinforced by the media, for example, who are telling you, you know, you're going to see drones no matter, you know, every time you turn a corner, you're going to see a killer drone, then, you know, the mind does play tricks on you. So, you know, as evidenced with some of these collisions with drones, you know, there was a report that DJI put out, and I think of the 5 reported collisions with drones, only one of those was actually identified as being a drone. One was a bat, another one was a bird, another one was a structural failure, but they saw a drone. So they saw a drone which didn't exist, and that's, you know, that is there's some data points there which are really, really important, because they show that it is possible for, you know, for pilots to see something or think they saw something, saw a drone when they didn't. So if it's possible to do it then it's also possible to do it with Airproxes as well.
I think if you look at this, like as you say, the one thing I think we should, James made a good point on around airline pilots. There are thousands of airline pilots in this UK, just in the UK, who at the end of the day are responsible for their people on board, and all they want to do is have a safe flight and get home at the end of it. 99% of them have no political agenda with regards to drones. Even if we look at all the Airprox reports that there have been, it only takes a very small minority in any group to want to report things, and then that's where, you know, whilst it might look like all air pilots don't like it, it's not the case. So dialogue is a good thing, and if we can get them on board to say, hey, let's look at this in a realistic manner. We're not saying it's not a drone, but we don't want you to automatically say that it is, because that's where we're at. That's at the end of the day. That's
exactly, and the Airprox board are already willing to do this. You know, you saw the report come out 2 or 3 weeks ago with the flying pig.
Yeah.
I don't know if you saw that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And that was classified as an unknown object because it was that was clear that that wasn't a drone. You know, that sounded like something which was very fictitious. Although having said that, I have seen some flying pig drones. There was some down in Brighton, I think, which would actually fit this description pretty well. So, you know, actually, it's not that, you know, it's not that stupid to think that you could get a flying pig drone. It sounds stupid to the layman, but you know, these things do exist. Whereas, you know, triangular shaped drones, which I've seen some reports with triangular shaped drones and some really interesting colors like metallic with red streaks across it and things like this. I've not seen drones which look like that before. I'm not aware of any that exist which look like that. So, you know, actually, the flying pig drone is probably more credible.
Well, we used to call them UFOs back in the day, didn't we? I mean, it's you lighties, you youngsters are calling them drones now. We all knew back in the day they were UFOs. Funny enough, I had someone at the school said to me, "Gary, was that you flying your drone over my house last night?" And I said, "No, because it wasn't." And I said, "How did you know it was a drone?" "Well, it must have been. It was flashing lights." And she was pretty miffed with me that I didn't know who it was. And this is a place about 10 kilometers up the road at night. Why should I know who it was if it was such a thing? But I was quite amazed at her attitude. She thought I would know, and I would know exactly what it was. So it's just struck me as interesting how these things get reported. Sorry, Ian.
I think I was just going to say, I think as not as much as this pains me, that's not the right term to use, but I think our AR Pass really do deserve quite a lot of credit here as well on this. You know, the last month or two, they really have stepped it up a gear. You guys, you know, James, I've often joked about the fence that's been sat on, but you know, this
pushed it over.
Pushed it over. But not only that, you know, they've also opened their annual. Is it your annual meeting, James? Is it the annual meeting, or the meeting's been opened up? There's a meeting that's been opened up as well for people to come and meet.
Yeah, this one.
We've also got actually next Thursday? We've got another meeting. It's up in Birmingham. It's a mapping challenge. So we've got the likes of Topcon are going to be coming. I'm going to be up there as well. There's a few other companies. I forget the full attendee list, but it's really interesting. It was organised by Jim Morris, who's a great guy. He used to be Ginger Innovations, but I forget the name of his company now. But he's really great. He used to be one of our top members in our pass. Really sort of pushed the boat out, and it just goes to show that actually. It's not all about the committee doing everything. You know, our pass is a members club, and the more you put in, the more you get out of it. And he's organised an event. I think there's about 30 people going to be attending, turning up with their drones and doing some mapping and basically showing what they can do. And it's a challenge to see who can produce the best data, basically. So. But that's it's going to be an educational event, so those who are a bit new to it can come along and learn stuff, and those kinds of events we're trying to do more and more of them, and I've already got my ideas for the next one, sort of the more educational one around FRZs. So we'd like to try and do something around that and try and bring in some the likes of NATs and maybe some airport operators. And air traffic controllers, so that we can, discuss the kind of problems that it causes when getting permission for FRZs takes so long, but also for us to understand, why they are nervous around issuing permission to fly in them. So. Again, it's an educational piece from both sides, and hopefully, if we can do something around improving that process for operators, that's another big one for them, because it's actually probably more important for them because it's delaying their projects, it's stopping them from doing work, and these are the sort of things that we kind of need to focus on to try and show that there is some benefit in what we're doing.
It's funny. I think 6 months ago or 4 months ago, I said I didn't really know what RPass did. Today, I feel very differently on that, and that's a good thing. It's easy now. It is dramatically different, and it's all of this is good. Everything you guys have been doing, I think it's easy to criticize, but you also have to recognize
that's what we're here for. That's us.
Criticize.
Oh yeah.
I'll get back to it in a minute when I get onto James about buying a proper computer.
Oh, don't start the whole Mac versus PC today. Otherwise, we won't talk about anything else all evening.
No, I have to say, I have been critical of RPAS in the past, but yeah, you guys are really stepping up the game. We need someone to, and they are doing it. For commercial operators, we need a voice. So
now I wonder. I was sent something. Sorry, James. We're talking about commercial operators. I was sent something, and I sent it on to Bruce. I don't know if you've read it, Bruce, but I think your New Zealand Commercial Operators Association are busy stitching you up a little bit.
Yeah. Was that meeting you got some minutes from? Yeah, very selective groups involved. It's I've got previous minutes of that, and most of them are highly redacted because it's commercially sensitive material in there. But
I never got them. It wasn't me. You must send them to me. That must have been what happened.
Yeah, could have been, but no. It's who knows what's going on behind the scenes. No one tells us.
Yeah. Oh, okay. I was hoping to tempt you out. Sorry, James. You carry on. I stopped you mid-flow then.
Well, that's all right. No, I was just going to say one more initiative we've got going, which we believe we can launch this before the end of the year, which we think is going to be massive. Not only for sort of putting RPAS, concreting out the future of RPAS as a trade association, but also from operators' perspectives as well, so that those operators who are operating to very, very high levels are able to get recognised for that, and that's the RPAS accreditation scheme. So there's two sort of components to this, and I've got a draft proposal I've put together. That's just sort of 5-page white paper at the moment, but the first component is operator accreditation. So the main part of that is around an audit, but it's an audit against various levels of competency as an operator. So the basic level will be, have you got an operation? Firstly, you have to have an operations manual, and it'll be an audit to make sure that you are following that. But we're going to try and do that remotely. And we think it's going to take, 2 or 3 hours to actually complete that audit on an annual basis. And so we keep the cost as low as possible, so that operators can prove to companies that not only, they're actually doing what they're saying they're doing. So that's the most basic level, but then going all the way through to the platinum, which is basically looking at that they will have an operations manual which follows CAP 722 sort of template and guidance. Some of their pilots will there's basically a whole sort of scheme we're putting together for remote pilots as well. So that's going to include an advanced sort of training course and test, industry-specific badges, so things like construction, rail, photography, videography, things like this, and then also experience. So how many hours they've got in their logbook. And using a mixture of those, we start increasing the levels up as you go along. So those that have, gone out there and done loads of training with their with their pilots, and have, got really good, solid health and safety procedures and all the rest of it, will be able to obtain that sort of higher level accreditation. And individual pilots will be able to show their skill level to a much easier in a much easier and clearer, transparent manner. So, if you're at the moment, the only way to really judge, how good a pilot is, well, how many hours have you got? Who have you worked for before? But this will give a really good, clear view of whether a pilot has done got 300 hours. They've done, they're good at surveying, they're good at photography. And also whether their sort of flying abilities are at a higher level as well. So we're kind of still this is all still in development, but it's sort of starting to become a bit clearer. But the key really is to provide them with benefit and to keep the cost as low as possible. And we're not actually going to produce any of the courses ourselves. we're going to leave that for the market to do. We will just say that the course, we will work with other trade associations, so people like RICS, maybe photography associations, roof associations, and people like this, who will basically tell us what they need for their industry. You know, if a construction company is bringing in an operator, well, they'll probably want to see a CSCS card as an example. But then what other things do they want to see? You know, and if we can put that into a course, then it will help people to show that they're going to be competent, and also increase the level of trust within the wider industry to adopt drones. Because at the moment, you know, they might bring in one drone operator and have a terrible experience. They could bring in another drone operator and have a fantastic experience. And how do they differentiate between those that are going to give them a good experience versus a bad one? So we're hoping that this will make it clearer for them.
Okay, and that's well, no, I'm thinking about the. Well, yes, yeah, I'll wake up again now. I was just thinking what it really will come down to is if you can advertise that loudly enough, as it were, as a scheme. Otherwise, it's just an ARPAS badge of rank and authority rather than a BMFA badge of rank and authority, or a Debenhams card rank of badge of authority.
Yeah, well, we've been speaking to some large companies. I've personally had conversations with the likes of Network Rail and people like this, who are crying out for something like this. So the need is probably going to come from the client rather than the operator themselves. But we do think as well that the training side of things, we're not really doing anything that's much different to what's already out there. So there's people already go on photography courses. People already pay £300 or £400 to go off and do a photography course with a training provider. All we're doing is putting a rubber stamp on it and saying, look, this course is a good course. It meets the standards of the course. It meets all of the requirements of this course. And if you do this course, it will be recognized nationally, not just, XYZ company's course. How do we sort of say it meets a certain level of standard? And that's really the key with it. We're not really changing anything too much. We're just recognizing when those that are good courses, and there are certain congested area courses out there which might not meet the standard, for example. Not naming any names.
Okay. Yeah. So it sounds like ARPAS has been busy, though. It sounds like it does seem like you've lifted your game. It sounds a bit rude, but you've lifted your game in the last 6 months or so.
Well, I hope so. It's I might actually get to do some of my own work at some point, but
Oh, there you go. You'll get there one day.
Yeah.
Now, what else? Oh, Spartan329. Gents, hello, how are you? Rybat has mentioned in the comments that it appears the Saudi anti-UAS systems failed just a bit. I actually read a bit about that. But
did you see Putin said, should have bought Russian?
Did he? Did he really?
Should have bought Russian drone technology.
Well, he probably bought Russian drones to do it. But anyway, moving on swiftly. It was wherever they came from. I actually read that they didn't want to fire off any retaliation. They saw it all coming, but they didn't want to do anything about it in case everyone else got worried, and that was the start of something big.
Also, don't forget, it's a great opportunity to put up oil prices and put more money in the bank.
Yes, funnily enough, we had dire warnings yesterday, the day before yesterday, whenever it was, of oil's going to go through the roof, and today in our papers in South Africa saying, well, actually, maybe not so much. It's not really.
Here in New Zealand, they've already put the petrol prices up. I mean, we've got about a 30-day stock of fuel in the country, and there's like a 30-day lead time before your shipments arrive. But they've put the price up. One company put up by 9 cents a litre on the basis of, well, it might go up in the future. And excuse me.
It's profiteering, isn't it?
It is.
It's a massive thing. You know, what annoys me about this whole story is, you know, it's drones. It's not drones. These were not bloody drones. These were weapons of war, right? There's no in between on this. You know, drone is not the correct term for what was bloody
They
used.
flew below 400 feet. They're a drone.
Yeah.
Yes, of course. And
Turn
we're
him
not
off. Turn him off. He's causing trouble again.
Yeah.
But now, you know, it's, you know, all you see over the news is drones attack Saudi. Drone is not really what was done here. This was a weaponized military attack, in all essence, wasn't it? You know, that's what this
and
was.
they're low cost now. That's the thing. You know, you can buy this sort of thing off the shelf from China or Russia. Saudi Arabia even has quite a big program.
Ian, are you suggesting that the media inserted the word drone because it has more cachet these days than missile?
No, I'd never suggest such a thing. It's a bloody mess.
We can go all over Facebook and now say it's not a drone, it's a missile debate instead of it's not a quadcopter. It's a missile. Don't you talk about my missile like that.
This was not little phantoms flying across and dropping things, was it? You know, but it's scary to see what it's done to the world in the sense of it's had a global effect. But that's what happens when you go after Saudi in the sense of oil, because they control so much of it. Interestingly, where I live, we have a very, very large oil refinery, funny enough.
You do, don't you? Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, and that all comes from the US, nothing to do with that at all. It's not going to affect the UK much, but it's bad headlines. Probably not really damaging in the end. There's been no big backlash off it. I think everyone pretty much realizes this is bigger fish than we're used to frying. Yeah.
Right back saying the dent was 7% loss in the world. I can put that. I forgot.
Yeah.
And let's raise the price 15 exactly. I think it might hasten the world's march towards electric vehicles and the like, because we see them doing things like this. It's like, I tell you what, we don't want to play this game anymore.
I said the very thing. I said this is why countries should now be transitioning to EVs as quickly as possible to reduce their dependency for the transport fleets on things like oil. And yeah, it'll happen.
Yeah, it will. It will. We're told here coal's a big deal here in South Africa, but we export most of it, and our export markets are greening up, and so coal will be, it's in terminal decline, they reckon now, which is actually a good thing at the end of the day.
In Australia, where still most of the electricity generated by coal, because the coal industry has very good connections to government.
Yeah, absolutely, and the Scottish oil was struggling. Just saying.
Was there? There's going to be a good bump for everyone else right now, isn't there? So,
but it can't go on for much longer, though, can it? As we do go the EV way and things like that, there can't be many more years left in the world, surely.
I think if you look, I think the stories with VW, all of them they've all gone into big partnerships, haven't they? In the last 2 years, they've all signed big deals. No one really has done the Tesla, though. Let's be honest. No one's delivered not an everyday vehicle, but a viable product, really, other than the Leaf. You got the small Nissan and things like that. But Tesla are the only one to really have delivered a family-size saloon most people can use. Yes, it's more expensive than most people, but it is still within some company car ranges, now with the higher end.
Don't rule out the Chinese. They're doing some amazing stuff. If you go into parking garages in China, they've all got EV charging connections on them, and you've got the likes of China bought MG, and they're bringing out an MG SUV, which is incredibly well priced compared to the Teslas of the world. They are going to be, in the next 10 years, they will be to EVs what Japan was to cars in the 1980s and 1990s. They're going to take over.
I think the biggest problem we'll have for our industry is what effect it'll have on the cost of our batteries. Because once the car industry does properly kick into this, at the end of the day, everything's supply and demand, and materials used, you're going to have manufacturing switch over to making car batteries. They're going to want to be involved in that more. And we could actually see an increase in LiPo costs for us.
Or it could reduce. Some quantities of scale, because lithium is an extremely abundant material. It's not like there's a shortage of lithium. Just grab yourself a gallon of seawater and you can pull heaps of lithium out of that. And if the infrastructure for the mining and refinement and provision of these materials grows to keep pace with the electric vehicle market, it could produce a reduction in prices for other uses of the materials.
And actually, I believe, when recycled, they actually end up better off than when they were first time round. The recycled product. There's all sorts of things. To the Nissan, they stood up a battery factory for taking the out of service ones from Leafs, and they're not, and then repurpose them into units for houses. And other things, and that unit's not actually making a profit because those batteries are lasting far longer than they thought they would. It's kind of an obvious story.
There's other elements as well, because as you say, Tesla are doing the same. They're taking battery packs and making sort of domestic energy storage units. And with the transition to renewables, I think we're going to see where your electric vehicle becomes an important part of your total energy solution. So you come home at night and you plug your EV in. It provides the last bit of charge provides the lighting and heating you need early in the evening. And then overnight, you can recharge off the grid. Or, when you plug it in a garage, it recharges during the day from solar panels on the roof of the parking garage. And so you've got like a energy reserve that you're driving around, but it also plugs into your house and provides a soak and a sink for energy surpluses during the day when you're parked up or at night. So it can smooth the load on the grid very significantly, which means our existing generation resources go further, and our renewable resources, which are not continuous like solar and wind, can be put to better use because we've got all these batteries hanging off the grid that we can absorb that energy.
And I think we forget with cars, we're still at a ridiculously low thermal efficiency level. I think Mercedes F1 have just hit 50%. I think it was last year of thermal efficiency from their full-on engine. Most modern cars are nowhere near that. So as you say, there's so much more we can do with EV. You can use it as a storage device, a load balancing device. You can use the energy in that to warm your home, to heat your home. The car, as you say, really it will become part of a system within your home. That's the hope, isn't it?
And you can even go down to Sainsbury's and pick up a bottle of milk.
Yeah. You could. Andy's Lee Robinson is saying that China's 421,000 electric buses, USA 300. Shenzhen, I think, just said one day it had some electric buses and they put 300 on the road or something, didn't they? Just in 1 week or something. And lithium batteries at the end of the second life of stationary storage, basically high grade ore for new batteries, almost infinite recyclability. Yeah. And Rybat saying that electric vehicles are extremely dangerous for first responders. I don't know that I have an opinion on that, but I bet Bruce does.
I've seen the figures that I've seen say there are more car fires involving petrol cars than electric cars. And if you read the things, there's more energy in a gallon of petrol than in a pound of dynamite or something. But there are risk factors associated with it. But when you look at the how many deaths have been attributed to EV fires, I don't know that there's been any, but there's been a hell of a lot attributed to car fires. Conventional ICE fires. I mean, there was a thing in the US where one manufacturer was sued because the fuel tank was at the back, and in the case of being rear-ended, the whole thing would catch on fire and burn the people inside. But electric vehicles tend to go off more slowly. So, you get a pop and a bang and you've got time to evacuate the vehicle. and they usually fail when they're being charged rather than when they're being driven. So I think that the failure mode is somewhat safer than just sitting in a pool of petrol and having it go bang.
And you can control the failure with a battery as well. If we're talking a vehicle with a battery underneath, it can be shielded and made in such a way that failure can be pushed away from the vehicle as well. You can have a heat shielding within. You can't so much do that on petrol cars. It's a fluid, it moves. If a battery goes up, where the battery is. The skin of the battery on one side can be armored, the skin of the battery on the other side cannot be. So it's not as simple as it instantly going up and burning everyone. You can somewhat control where that pressure release is going to go with it as well, and they do that anyway as part of it, don't they?
Yeah, and if Rybat's worried, just don't become a first responder. Become a second responder. You're much safer.
You're safer. Stand behind the first guy who's burning.
Yeah. Oh, that's a shocking answer, but two shocking answer there. It's in the Lake Victoria Challenge held in Rwanda, Lake Kivu, coming up next year, January, February, maybe. They're making that electric VTOLs only deliberately with a forward-looking sort of thought to, well, petrol, nothing's going to be around soon. He was a first responder, too late. Yeah, so well, that's that then. So next week on Top Gear, we'll be discussing. So what else? What else did I see? What else? I saw that. Go on, mate. Go on.
No, I was going to say, do you see this nuclear self-powered drone by NASA? I've seen that.
Yeah,
article.
I did. I just seen that actually this evening. Yes. Well, not for local climbs, though, is it?
Wait till that one goes wrong.
Well, yes. Oh, here we go. Andy's saying 100 kilowatt-hour Tesla battery contains as much as 2.5 gallons of gasoline. People walk away from EV5s.
Well, Richard Hammond was dragged, but he did survive. So
yeah, but he did roll down a hill, however many times it was first.
So far.
Yeah. Well, I can't. I'm looking personally. I'm looking forward to an electric future. Yeah. I've got to sort my house out onto something renewable here, because my electricity bills, they are 1/4 of them is the actual money we spend on the electricity, and the rest is line fees and this, that, and every other fee they can imagine. Here, don't know what it's like in the rest of the world, but
I thought you were going to say because someone's going to nick your lines at any moment. That's what
they've been nicking. I tell you, they've been nicking the lines, the overhead lines from the trains. They've been nicking them relentlessly for about 10 kilometers here. And of course, what do? They come and fit brand new, thick old copper back up there. So what happens the following day? They all go again. And I kid you not, I've seen in the last 2 weeks, I've seen 4 trains that, because when they, obviously the train, I don't quite understand how they all don't stop instantly. When we switch the power off on the Scale Electrics or on my train set, they all stop immediately. But I don't quite understand how they can keep going. Maybe Bruce can.
Depends which end it's being fed from. If you cut it off from the end it's not being fed from, then obviously there's still power to the end that is being fed. But one thing that raises an important issue with EVs is because this will put such a huge load on the grid, I don't think many countries have actually planned far enough ahead, because I believe that within 10 years, just like in Norway, we're going to have a huge percentage of new vehicle sales will be EVs. And I think governments and infrastructure is going to find suddenly out of nowhere, they all get caught by surprise. Oh, we never saw this coming. Everyone's bought EVs. There's not enough power generation. Our reticulation grid isn't up to scratch. Oh my goodness, what are we going to do? We have to have power blackouts and cuts and things. I think they're all way too slow to react to what is going to be a very rapid transition.
Well, we're ahead of you there. We're already having power cuts all the time anyway. So we're leading the way. We're leading the way there as regards power cuts.
Well, I don't know. If you go hunting on the internet for a long time, you'll find these amazing ideas.
I don't know what I want to find.
If you hook up an alternator to the wheels on the cars, and it will charge up the batteries as you go along.
Exactly. Yes,
I'm going to put magnets on the battery leads of my EV, magnets on there, and that'll make the electricity go much longer.
Yeah. I put up ages ago. I put up a post on SS News that was basically a perpetual motion machine, and I thought it was so funny. This thing that this bloke sent. I thought I'll put it up, and people were angry with me. They were so angry. It's just like, come on, people.
I went to see. I don't know if you know Ken Wallace. He was the guy who. One of the founders of the autogyro in the old. What was it? Little Nelly in the James Bond film.
Yes.
And I went to visit him. This was probably about 6 or 7 years ago now, maybe even longer than that. But he went and had this little machine in his garage. He was an absolute madman, proper eccentric, mad professor, inventor in his garage. And you go in his garage, and it was just full of crazy inventions he'd made. And but he was telling us his joke. He had this little contraption which would turn round this wheel. And in the middle, though, he'd hide a candle, and apparently everyone that went round there, he'd tell them that it was a perpetual motion machine that he'd built, and no one could work out how on earth he did it. But yeah, he was an absolute madman. He built these pistols. I'm not even joking. These pistols would fire about a centimetre through a piece of wood, and it was about this big. And he'd make it from a Spitfire bullet. So he'd basically go into a scrap yard and pull out not a bullet, but a bolt, sorry, from a Spitfire, and then basically handcraft a pistol from it about this, about an inch big. And he'd be carrying it around in his pocket when we went out for lunch, and he'd be carrying it around in his pocket. It was an absolute madman, but we kind of miss these kinds of people. I'm sure they still exist, but they're now all making YouTube videos.
Or knives.
Over here. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. It seems the modern world doesn't quite have space for that sort of thinking anymore, which is a bit crazy, isn't it? And I think I'm right in saying he really sort of perfected the Benson autogyro, didn't he? He did a couple of mods to it and made it a little bit safer. But saw him many times at air shows and met him on a couple of air shows as well years ago. But absolutely very big character.
Brilliant guy. But back on the whole electric vehicle stuff, what happened to hydrogen? Hydrogen was this whole thing which was going to transform the way we move around and all the rest of it. What's happened to that?
Still coming, I think. Still coming.
Away. Science got in the way. Science and engineering got in the way of hydrogen. It's a crap fuel. Because people, I love it. They roll out these things. There's more energy in a kilogram of hydrogen than a kilogram of petrol or whatever. But have you seen the size of a kilogram of hydrogen? You've seen the volume of a kilogram of hydrogen. How do you store the damn stuff? You've got to either use cryogenic techniques, which involve effectively very large thermos flasks, and you've only got a limited amount of time you can store it like that because it gets warm and boils off. Or you've got to use extremely high pressures, which means you're driving around in a bomb. Or you've got to use metal hydrides, and they require the use of heat to force the hydrogen out of the hydride. It's just there's so many problems with hydrogen as a fuel, both in its transport and storage, that it's never going to work. And also, where does hydrogen? They say, it's going to be clean and green. Only thing that comes out. Where does hydrogen come from? Usually from the cracking of hydrocarbons, i.e., crude oil. So it's still a fossil fuel in most cases.
Yeah, it's black hydrogen, isn't it? They call it.
What they
you could argue
is to make an engine which runs on carbon dioxide, and we'd be sorted. The planet will be saved.
Or you could just stay at home. Just stay at home. That's what I do.
You could argue with regards to the hydrogen that it was in the big oil interest to have a product that could be dispensed through pumps that happened to come from the big black dino stuff. So I think a lot of that, where did it come from? I think there was heavy amounts of industry money pushing that back then, just to make everyone think this is the future. Because at the end of the day, if they want to continue running oil refineries, running refineries and doing all of that stuff, they need to have something that allows them to continue to have to make something.
But in the next 10 years of our world, it's probably going to still be lithium, isn't it? Or lithium ion. There's not really, there's no big changes in the next 10 years, is there?
No, I think battery
read the science-wise every day. There's a new battery technology that's going to change the world. All we need is another $20 trillion for development. But it never happens.
It's not capacity. The capacity is not really the issue now. It's charge speed. That's where the big developments have been. I saw something, a battery about a month ago posted that they said they can charge from 0 to 100% in 3 seconds or something. It will just absorb all of the energy. Yeah, it's still not available. I think what we'll see is battery technology will evolve just like it has. Look how much better batteries are in the last 5 years. There's not going to be a groundbreaking change. You'll see capacities increase, charge times come down, safety go up slowly over the next 10 years. That's what I'd expect to happen.
Well, just look at DJI. DJI aircraft used to be 12, 15 minutes, and now we're up to about 30. So, aerodynamics has got better, batteries have got better, everything, the efficiencies of these things is just getting better and better. So, and especially as we go and get better materials as well, the actual weight of these machines will come down. So you're going to get better efficiencies from that. I think you're right. I think battery technology isn't going to, we're not going to see like 10 times the amount of energy storage, but, maybe double within the next 10 years.
One of the most promising things is where they have a battery which consists of a catalyst, and then you have an electrolyte. You pour the electrolyte into the battery, it generates electricity. When it's finished generating electricity, you drain that electrolyte out and put different electrolyte in, and then you recycle the original. So you've got a liquid fuel system, but it's the electrolyte that you are putting in, not petrol or anything. And the plates remain unchanged during the whole process. So you can go fill up with the Bowser thing and your old electrolyte gets drained out, gets reprocessed. So you're then using a liquid fuel, but you've got an electric vehicle. It's really good, and there's a lot of promise shown in that.
Yeah, and that would work for what we got already. We got these stations stationed all around the country, all around the world. At the end of the day, a system that comes has to be one that works within existing infrastructure. The reality is, yes, we could rewire the world and put charge points everywhere, and charge points is a fairly simple thing to do anyway. But we haven't got enough energy. We haven't got enough energy now, unless we start building nuclear power stations every 5 minutes, because we can't burn any more coal. We can't burn any more oil. We haven't got enough gas. So the reality is, if we want to go electric, it's going to have to be wind, solar, or nuclear. We all know what happens with nuclear when it goes bad. Just look over in Japan. So the electric is the ideal solution, but it's not ideal to have to charge the batteries via producing energy. We have to look at other methods, and the one Bruce mentioned is ideal.
And the other problem we've got too is that what we want is actually more efficient vehicles. And when you put 900 kilos of battery in a vehicle, you're wasting an awful amount of energy just in cornering forces and things that you can get regenerative braking. But when you go around a corner, you're changing the direction of that vehicle. The acceleration is an energy input you can't recover. So ultimately, the lighter the vehicle, the less energy it requires to move it around. But batteries are heavy. So we're actually we're working against ourselves there. So I think we're going to have a complete rethink about what the whole thing about personal transport represents. And people have said to me, and I probably agree with them, in the future, you probably won't own a vehicle. You'll just go and use one when you need it. It's just like these scooters and these bikes, you can like Boris bikes, and that when you need one, you just go and put your little token on the door, drive around, then just leave it somewhere, and you just pay while you use it, because the fixed cost of operating a vehicle are getting more and more every day. It's very expensive to own a vehicle, just in depreciation alone, so especially with electric vehicles. So I think that we will just see a change in the paradigm in which we engage our personal transport.
I agree.
It's interesting we're talking about a lot of environmental stuff here, and it's if only there was a group out there who were trying to rebel against the extinction of the planet.
Oh yeah.
I'd be right behind them. But while you mentioned that, I saw that was brilliant. Notice what they charged them with: conspiracy to commit a public nuisance. Well, I thought these drones were going to kill people. How's that a nuisance? Surely there must have been a much more severe crime. If it's really true that drones are going to bring down airliners, why are you only calling it a nuisance? It must be worse. And the other thing is, in New Zealand, the police would have just ignored those people, because they would have been conducting a shielded operation, flying no higher than their own heads. And the police have said, yeah, go for it, because they would have appreciated that there's no risk associated with flying a SEMA 20 or something next to your head, beyond the boundaries of an airfield. So the regulations that the UK has produced have just created a whole lot of work for police, unnecessary work, and given grandstanding environmental terrorists an opportunity to make a big noise where otherwise they would remain totally silent.
It was amazing. NOTAM, sorry, Ian, they stood up a NOTAM and actually did have jamming in place around Heathrow for those days. I was amazed they went that far, because if you think about it, all the cash in transit vans, everyone on the M4, just name something that uses GPS, people's pacemakers, if they're going for the C2 link as well. Just imagine the chaos they could have caused if they fired that off.
Yeah, they were clearly on top of it. They were there in force, that's for sure. I did laugh. There was one thing that made me laugh, that the protesters were complaining they couldn't fly their drones because they were using jammers, which I did laugh, because they went online and protested, which is quite funny considering they were protesting using drones, trying to do them illegally. They didn't get near it. It hardly made the news. So, I was a bit concerned for the industry. We might get another kick in, but overall, in some ways, their heavy-handedness has actually helped a little bit. At least the drone industry hasn't come out too badly out of it, even though it had nothing to do with us at all.
Well, it annoyed me because I had to go and get up early that day, because I was asked by two BBC London and Talk Radio, I think they wanted like a comment on it. And they're like, they always seem to want a comment at like 6:30 in the morning. They don't want it at like 9 or 10. It's always 6:30 in the morning, and so there I was up at 6 o'clock, with my coffee, and then I get a text message through saying, "Nothing's happened. You can go.
Don't worry about it.
We don't need you." It was quite an anticlimax, that one. But
it's frustrating that we've been dragged into the centre of something that frankly has nothing to do with us as an industry.
But
right.
Gatwick showed us the way forward for that, really, didn't it? Just telephone them and you can ground a load of aeroplanes. So, I mean, to be fair, it's a low-hanging fruit, wouldn't it? For the reaction, if they got the reaction, and I think the British Airways, the BALPA British Airways pilot strikes actually getting up to cause as much economic damage as the alleged Gatwick incident.
An interesting precedent's been set here. They were charged with conspiracy to commit a public nuisance. So if someone else is caught flying their drone near an airport, that's what they should be charged with, not under the Civil Aviation Act or anything like that. It should be conspiracy or creating a public nuisance, because we've already, the police have defined that that's what they were doing. Flying a drone near an airport is a public nuisance. It's not a criminal offence. It's not a breach of aviation regulations, just nuisance. So if I ever got pulled up for doing that in the UK, I'd say, no, look, I'm a nuisance. I'm not a criminal, and I'm not trying to bring down airliners.
Well, a bit of bad news down here, as you mentioned, the charge is somebody flew. We had a big our murder rate. We're getting there. We're up to 58 people a day now. Keep it coming. We're winning. We're winning.
That's the demon that ties.
Well, it's a flipping truth. But so there was a protest in Cape Town, and it was outside Parliament, and so there were thousands of people. So somebody went up with whatever, took the straight down shot of the great big crowd, because people would say it wouldn't happen. And it's turned out that there isn't anything, and the CAA then here got involved. There isn't anything on the books to charge them with. So they're charging them under terrorism offences. So if that one comes through, then that becomes our default setting down here. And that's not the best. So it is interesting when these things are tested. It's not all there, is it? It's not all on the books as to what to do with people when they step out of line.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. There are so many laws that already cover anything you can do to endanger a person or property. That why we need more rules and more powers and more whatever, just because suddenly it's a drone, it's ridiculous. In fact, most of the cases I think in the States that have been brought against people who have caused problem with drones have been brought about under normal ordinances, and local bylaws, rather than anything to do with the FAA regulations.
I found it interesting. I know what did happen after we had our chat last week was the British Model Flying Association in the UK said, tell you what, members, and I'm going to read this, not rush to register. It says, we would therefore encourage members not to rush into registering or taking the test when DRES is rolled out in the next few weeks until we have concluded our current round of discussions with the CAA and DFT and issued further guidance to members. For the time being, we should suggest that it remains business as usual. And I understand, hang on, let me go at the top here. Let me get, I believe some organisation, on behalf of Graham Brown from something called ARPAS on behalf of commercial drone operators and high-level delegations. Some group like that has been helping the BMFA.
Yeah, so they're basically, I forget the guy from the BMFA, the CEO or director, whoever he is, but they sat down end of last week, Thursday, I think it was, Wednesday or Thursday last week, and I can't really say too much at the moment because we still haven't got any concrete outcomes, but it looks like the price is movable. It looks like the MP, Member of Parliament, who is looking at this, is fully behind the drone industry view, and is... I've got to be a little bit careful what I say because I don't want to land anyone in anything. But
I didn't mean to drag you into. No, I just don't say anything.
Yeah, I think wait for the news to come out. It looks like there's some positive movements. It looks like the MP is understands why we would be annoyed with the drone registration fee and the costs that are involved. And I think, hopefully we can all work together with the CAA and DFT to try and look to see how it can be improved. But there is stuff going on, and RPAS and BMFA have been, largely involved in driving that. So, if we can bring it down to a tenner, that would be great.
One thing I couldn't believe when I read that stuff was they were going to control line models were included in the drone regulations. Seriously, control line model? Who's drinking what?
I see. I'm quite skeptical on this. Nothing to do with our past BFMA. I think they're all trying to do something. My concern is we're going to get lip service until this comes in. I think the price is irrelevant. 10 quid, 16 quid. The cost doesn't really change anything. 6 quid for a year doesn't. If there's not one person who can't afford the 6 quid who can register, let's be honest. Okay, the price. If it moves around from 10 quid, I don't care. Commercial operators are mostly upset that they have to register when they've already registered being a PFCO. Why are we having to do this twice? What I don't think is going to happen is, are they willing to let that much money slide? Because at the end of the day, this is a registration scheme that has to have financed. We've got roughly 4,500 commercial operators in the UK, something like that, with the BFMA as well. They're leaving a lot of money on the table. If they're going to turn around and say no commercial operator has to pay, that would be fantastic. I would love that to be the situation. I'd have no issues actually registering and not paying if because I'm a PFCO. I don't ever see that happening, but that would be a nice solution. Do I think the BFMA are going to get a full pass? No, I don't see it. I honestly, they'll get a concession, a small one. I don't see there being a full get out of jail for them. I just don't see it happening.
Well, I think our position on all this really is, we think that drone registration is a good idea. We think it will help certain activities in the same way that a driving license helps with, keeping or giving people speeding fines when they're not doing things right. I think it's mainly around the idea of people not having an excuse, because if they've got registered and they've done the test, then they should know the laws, and then the police can then hand out their £100 fine for when they break them. I can see Bruce shaking his head there, but that's kind of our position is really, we support registration. We're not really, the individual cost per member isn't really an issue, but it's more the principle of when you add up all of those membership or those registrations, what the cost is in total. Because, it's more of a case of, why is it costing 2.8 million a year? How on earth has it come to that figure? And it kind of feels a little bit like someone's getting ripped off through this, and it's not the CA, it's not DFT, it's your hobbyist who just wants to go down the park and fly their £30 foamy plane around the park, and it weighs 450 grams. That's the person who's having to pay this. They might only do it once a year. It might be someone who's 16 years old and wants to just go out and start up a new hobby. Well, now instead of it costing them 30 quid for the plane and being able to fly it now costs them £46. But
one thing on that, James, for anglers have to do it for course fishing. So I was an angler for a long time, and I'm not for them having to do it, but we also have to recognise other sports people have to pay as well to do it. And whilst they've never had to do it,
you got the benefit of the bailiffs looking after the river and things like that.
You do, and I'm not disputing that. But on the flip side, there is other sports where people have to go out and do it as well. If you see what I'm saying.
I think that's fair. I think it's if there was a good justification for how that money was being spent, then I'd accept. I think we'd accept that. It's just for a database with essentially an e-learning course. If a startup business went to a venture capitalist and says, I need 2.8 million to create a database with 170 people's names and addresses and do an online test, the venture capitalist would literally laugh at them, because they'd be like, it's just crazy money. You would in the private industry that could never happen, because that business business would be out of business straight away.
Don't forget, it actually costs 4.1 to set it up. Not 2.
But this deal is done, is it not? And this deal is done. This deal is signed, is it not? This is a done deal. Someone's getting that money, whatever happens.
You're all wrong. registration. Registration is complete rubbish. Now, let me give you some figures. Here in New Zealand, there are 5,000 manned aircraft in the country, and they generate 8,000 incident reports every year, right? So that's 1.6 incident reports per aircraft. These aircraft are registered, the pilots are licensed, they pay fees, it's all regulated to buggery. And then we have the drone situation. There are 77,000 drones in New Zealand and less than 500 incident reports they generate, which means 0.006 incident reports per drone. So if registration and licensing was an effective way to reduce bad things happening, why is it that in New Zealand, where there's no registration, there's no licensing for drones, the rate of incident reports from drones is so much lower? We're talking 4 orders of magnitude lower than for manned aircraft, which are regulated and licensed and registered. Show me anywhere in the world where a registration system has stopped bad things from happening with drones, because there are plenty of countries require registration now. There are still bad things happening despite registration, despite licensing. The other problem we've got is that it's not the case that the guy who wants to fly his foamy down the park has to pay an extra 16 quid. The price has got nothing to do with it. What it is that the 8-year-old kid who wants to go down the park and fly his plane cannot legally do so without his mother. He might be in a solo parent family. She has to sit the exam. She has to learn the answers. She has to go down with him to the park. She's not going to do that. We have a discrimination against people on the basis of age, and that is unacceptable. It's a breach of human rights to say to a kid, I'm sorry, but you can't fly model aircraft because you're in a solo parent family and your mother doesn't have the time or resources to get the certification. That is a human rights issue. And if there was a justification, if we had these models and drones causing deaths all over the place, yes, that's understandable. But there isn't even a risk assessment to quantify or exactly define what the nature of this problem is. We've got a historical evidence that says it's not a problem. Nobody's been killed. No one's been seriously injured. And you can't just take away people's freedoms, which are basically, they've been there for decades. You can't just take those away without some really serious evidence to prove that the withdrawal of those freedoms is essential to preserve public safety. There is no risk to public safety at the moment. The risk is so small as to be immeasurable. And if you want to deal with issues, deal with the big issues. Deal with manned aviation, which costs human lives every year. People die, and not just the pilots, but also the passengers, in some cases, people on the ground. So huge risk. And so we need to bring these people to account. You're having us on. You're kidding us. Nothing that you say is justified in terms of your backup, your evidence, your risk assessment. And because we're just standing back and going, oh, they're the regulators, we can do this, they do it. But we need to go with our drones to the end of Heathrow runway, hold them above our heads and be arrested. This is not dangerous. And that's the whole folly of it. Those guys, one of those guys got arrested for holding a drone over his head. How much paranoia and fear mongering goes on when that is all you have to do to be arrested? Why can't people see the lunacy of this? And thus endeth my rant.
Well, I think there's two points there, Bruce. So I think the first one is where are these rules coming from? And actually, if you look at really what's going on in the bigger picture, EASA is probably a big culprit of this, because European nations who are adhering to EASA are going to have to comply with the EASA rules, and part of that is drone registration. So I think, if we look at the source, let's not say that word, otherwise it'll end up with I don't know, we'll probably end up getting CIA cut us off or something. Again. So I think EU is a big part of it. With regards to EASA, I don't really know what relationship is between EU and EASA, but they're somehow related. They're European something. With regards, I think that's the main driver behind a lot of this. And the second part, which I think is important, I'm going to sneeze. I'm all right. I'm back again. I think the other part, which is important to remember, is currently we're in a world where drones can't really do a lot of harm. So I think what they're trying to do is prepare for the future of where we've got potentially people trying to do more harm with these things. And I completely agree. In today's climate, there isn't a lot you can do. I think the guy from the Science and Technology Committee put it quite succinctly, is, in today's age, there's a lot easier ways to commit terrorism than there is to use a drone. but in 10 years' time, that might not be the case. And so,
Then
how
do the
you-
regulations in 10
yeah.
years. Don't make regulations now for things that don't exist. Review them, and if that becomes an issue, if there's a risk assessment that says yes, this is now an issue, then you do your regulation. I don't regulate on the basis, well, we need to regulate because something might happen. Might not, but it might. And also, if you look at the way drones are going, they're getting smaller, they're getting lighter, they're getting safer with improved technology. The risk is actually reducing, not increasing. I think the people in the UK and around the world, they need to stand up and say, well, you know, we're not going to accept this regulation because it's uncalled for, and it's take that case of the kid, that should go to the European Court of Human Rights. Someone should take a case in action and say this is a breach of the European human rights regulations. You can't discriminate against people on the basis of social status or their age unless you have a case to prove that there is a safety issue, and they can't prove it. And that's how you get these regulations overturned. And use the European courts to do that for you. If EASA are going to say we're Europe and you've got to follow us, then get the human rights court involved and get them to overturn EASA's diktats in this case. People are so passive. I just don't understand it. If you don't fight for the freedoms you have, you will lose them. And once you've lost them, you will never get them back. I'm an old militant. I'm with the BMFA on this. Don't you register. You just hold out. Eventually, they'll cave in. You know, if nobody registers, what are they going to do? They've got a $4 million database with no entries in it. I mean, it's going to make them look stupid as they actually are. But people need to stand strong and be prepared to stand up. Where's your principles, people? Come on.
Yeah, it's I actually would blame the FAA. I think, well, not necessarily the FAA. I'd blame the counter UAS people and the worry mongers over there that talked up the American pilot database, which then, well, really not a lot's happening with that. But there was a lot of fear, and people jumped on straight after that. And interestingly, you see that the Part 107 pilots down. You have to retake the test every 2 years. 73% of people didn't take it. They didn't retake it. So the size of the industry, the size of the threat. So what that basically means is, although it's very clever because so they're not current, but they haven't lost their certificate. So that number is always ticking up. The total number of pilots is always ticking up, but they're not current, and that's the thing. So they couldn't actually operate commercially. So America, in actual fact, is at the number of pilots, I think it was 107,000, that they expected there to be in 2017. So where is this business expanding fast, this, that, and the other? Where is this huge industry? Where is all this extra risk coming from? Because there's now 1 kajillion drones, and they've got 1.3, I think it is, million drones registered or whatever there. Well, how many of those are still flying? How many of those aren't just, in the bottom of a cupboard? It's
show me the bodies. Show me the bodies. That's my bottom line. Show me the bodies. When you show me the pile of bodies, then I'll consider your demands for registration and licensing, all sort of rubbish. In the meantime, stop making stuff up.
Yeah. Well, luckily, James is helping with that stop making stuff up push there with the Airprox people this coming week. So that's good. So that's a start. I do think the UK drone registration scheme will fail. Well, they must do. How can they ever make this money back?
They're never going to get
I've been making plenty of videos inciting civil disobedience and non-compliance. I think as I say, people have to have principles. You lose your principles, you might as well just dig a hole and bury yourself, because without principles, we're just animals.
Well, I don't know. I think animals might have more principles. I think that's on the what's the thing I've been showing. Funny, I've been showing them. Have you met this bloke that's made a reserve up the mountain, just up the road from you? Got evacuated to Tokoro. I've been showing his children. He's regenerated the ground there. I can't remember his name there, Bruce. He's a neighbour of yours somewhere. Doesn't look too dissimilar to you. Made a reserve. Oh well. But yeah. Anyway, I'm moving aside. Look at the time. Has anyone else seen anything else this week? I've not been drinking, honest. This is water. I've got a cold again.
Straight vodka, isn't it?
Straight vodka, yeah. Have you seen the new Alta X has been released talking about drones? I suppose we should talk about drones. A very weird release, this. I don't quite get this one at all. Large, heavy lift quad with no redundancy. I don't understand what market that's aiming for, because they already have the Alta 6 and the 8. and now they've released a large heavy lift quad which appears to compete with those products, yet it's got no redundancy. So you're going to be hanging a very expensive payload under it with more risk than hanging it under a 6 or an 8. So it's a weird one. It looks a very nice aircraft with a very clever folding mechanism, extremely clever. But a weird one to me. I don't quite understand it. I don't get it.
Yeah, I've been spending a little bit of time arguing people on LinkedIn. As you know, that's one of my favorite things to do, and that's been revolving around the urban air mobility people, which leads into this registration, the whole thing. That's partly why we need it, because we're about to all be flying in the flying cars. It's coming soon, and you know, people have been telling me it's okay to have a large manned quadcopter. Like, okay. And it'll be okay because they're going to auto-rotate and do all that sort of thing, because they're going to have gearboxes, and they're going to have this, and they're going to have that. Yeah, Daniel Varsi flight tests, he works for Alta, doesn't he? But it's like, well, hang on a minute. So you're telling me we need gearboxes, we need articulated heads and all that sort of things. Hang on a minute. What could we do? I tell you what, we could make one really big set of rotor blades, and we could have a little set whizzing around at the back, and then we'd have a helicopter. You know, it's like, come on, people.
It is, and you know, I've had a good look over. It's a very nice looking craft. It's, you know, it's maximum payload 15.9 kilos, up to 40 minutes flight time, I think it was. Very clever folding mechanism, but why a big quad? Who wants to hang a very large, expensive LiDAR below a big quad when you can do it below an Alta or something like that? But some interesting bits on it. The folding mechanism looks really clever. PX4 based as well, and I believe they run the Cube autopilot. The other versions do, so I assume they're still using that hardware. They haven't said they are, and they haven't said they're not. But
I'm
15
reading it now. It does. Yeah, it's the PX4 flight control stack.
Yeah, PX4 flight control stack, and they were using the Cube as the hardware as well. Nice machine. You know, it looks nice. It's a bit like it's too big to compete with anything else other than their own products. It's not M200 territory. It's far larger than that. So weird one. 15 grand.
Well, apparently the unfolded diameter from tip to tip of the props, 2.27 meters.
Yeah,
that is an absolute beast.
It's a monster. It's big. That's big. And why you'd want to put a big payload under that?
I'm building a 2-meter quad at the moment, which I'll be doing a video on in the next couple of weeks, and that'll surprise and shock you.
Well, I don't know.
It's cost me under $100 to build this quad. It's got to be good.
Oh, right, okay. It'll cost 15 grand.
Maybe it might shock you while you're building it, like literally.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. It has DJI components on it as well.
It does. I know. It is. It's all DJI gear, really, isn't it? I wonder. They must see a market for it, otherwise they wouldn't have built it. But it must be a very, very small market.
Yeah,
I reckon it's probably the cinematography, but you know, wildlife cinematography out in the middle of nowhere in the jungle, or you know, up in the hills or something like that. Because some of these big cameras, the big cinematography cameras, can weigh sort of like, you know, 6, 7, 8 kilos. And you know, if you're flying over a jungle, you need 6 rotors. If you can get another 10 minutes of flight time.
It depends how much the camera's worth, doesn't it?
That's the kit. Yeah, how much is the payload worth, and that's what it comes down to. You know, if you're flying a red or something like that under it, that's the key here. As you said, they clearly think there's a market. I've argued for a very long time that multi-rotor redundancy is not important in the consumer drone industry. You know, when the Unique H come out, fantastic aircraft. I really like the H. However, having 6 rotors doesn't bother me at all. Quads are relatively reliable. We don't get problems. But when you're dealing with such an expensive payload, it becomes an insurance policy at that point, and that's the weird one. But yeah, interesting. I'd love to see it. I'd love to see it for myself. It looks to be a very, very nice craft indeed.
The more you have to go wrong. Where's the other Ian? He could tell us all about the cameras because we've got the Blackmagic 6K cinema camera now. It's only $4,000. $4,000 US for a 6K cinema camera. It's amazing, and the weight is way down on the reds and things. The camera technology is advancing really quickly. So I don't think you don't need those huge lift platforms now to get cinematic quality video or footage, and that's going to change this again. Everything is getting smaller, lighter, cheaper, and safer.
Look at the new Panasonic. Look at the new H1. It's you don't need those big cameras to get 6K or anything like that. I've just bought a new, not point and shoot, but I bought a new Sony. I'm shifting from Panasonic to Sony, and as you say, what you're getting for your money now is so much cheaper than it was 12 months ago, and smaller and lighter, and it's just ridiculous.
Yeah,
one little piece of personal news this week, which was quite good, is I can't name any names at this stage, but one of my OSC clients I helped managed to help them to get onto the sandbox, CA sandbox for BV loss. So put together a OSC on BV loss, and being accepted onto the CIA sandbox. That's quite an exciting journey we're going to be having with that, but more news, I dare say, towards the end of the week on that. So
is it like Top of the Pops or something?
Yes. Yeah. Well,
we've been talking about smaller and lighter, and you said on a personal note, I was getting a bit worried there for a moment.
But come on down to Rwanda next year. If you want to do BV loss, we'll have loads of BV loss. So how far do you want to go? You name it, we'll let you do it. Come on down. It'll be fun. It's all over water, so it better work. Whatever it is. Yeah.
Maybe we need to get our friend, what's his name? The guy who's sometimes on here who flies perfectly legally all the time.
Oh yeah, he was here. Yeah, Nicola. He's actually the king of BV loss, of course. Yes.
But interesting to note, speaking of regulations and so forth, Canada's had this non-prescriptive regulation of sub 250s, right? Which means you can fly BV loss, you can fly to 1 million feet if you're capable of it, and everything like that. There's been no incident reports that I'm aware of involving sub 250 in Canada, despite the fact there's no prescriptive regulation. That light hand will work.
Yeah, well, yeah, we all know it's nonsense, don't we? Whichever form it comes, it's all nonsense, and it's all holding back an industry that has got struggles of its own without having regulators putting up great big barriers as well. That's a semi-rant there, wasn't it? Right, so what else have we seen? Look, it's 20 past now. Any more? What else have we seen, gentlemen? And
has anyone got any questions for this Airflux stakeholder event?
Why is the sky blue? That's always my standard question.
Well, because it wasn't ancient Greek. The ancient Greeks didn't actually call the sky blue, did they? But anyway, that's another thing. It's only a term. But
how many bulb pilots did it take to spot a drone?
What?
Yeah.
How many pilots does it take to spot
How many Balpa pilots does it take to spot a drone?
Well, I think I'd like to know if they have considered their wording in relation to what the press will read, or perhaps even really just a single line digest form rather than unpacking and releasing quite as many details as they do, which can be construed in many ways. I think you said before they're working on changing that form.
Ask them why they haven't fitted dash cams to airliners.
I think that's actually down to the airliners. I think that's against policy for airlines.
Yeah, but it's safety. Policy counts for nothing. We're talking safety here. If there's air procs, then we need evidence. So why is the air procs board not insisting that all commercial aircraft, have a camera so that we can verify these air procs reports?
Well, they're not really required to have tracking. They weren't required to have tracking up until recently, were they?
Oh, that's another thing, isn't it? I think it's 4,500 aircraft in America aren't going to meet the ADS-B mandate. Yes. So that didn't go very well, did it? Technologies from
not just being Class G airspace, they'll just stay out of the controlled airspaces, and they don't have to have ADS-B.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Apparently, we'll see. So that was yeah, so that's another thing that happened. Anyway, right, I am definitely ranting. I'm definitely on the tired side with the cold. So on that, unless we have any more, do we have any more, gentlemen? Going once, going twice. Dear viewer, wherever you are in the world, thank you very much. Oh, I saw a hand up. Have you got something there, James?
No, I was sort of doing the sort of, you know, when they sell
Hammer.
stuff. I was doing
Oh, the
that.
hammer. Exactly. That's what I've got to get one. I've got to get one. Exactly. Homes Under the Hammer, all the other things I watch. Escape to the Country. Anyway, daytime TV rules here as well. Yeah, wherever you are in the world, dear viewer, have a lovely rest of the week. I hope it's safe. If you're flying on a weekend, have fun. Don't crash, or don't crash much, or crash with vigor and grace. And we'll see you again at 2100 GMT next week for more car stuff this week. So thanks very much. Thanks, gentlemen. Thank you very much. Thanks, James. Good luck on Thursday. Maybe we can get you back next week to hear all about it. Hopefully we can see a video if you manage to release anything. I'll really look for it. And Andy Lee, that Draco crash yesterday, but then yeah, the guy was pushing it, wasn't he? Yeah, lucky chap. And on that, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, see you next week. Cheers. Gotta remember, it's double clicker this button here.